Silence is never empty. It is charged. It hums beneath the surface of every conversation, every glance, every pause that lingers just a second too long. While words rush to fill space and soothe discomfort, silence does the opposite. It exposes, it unsettles, it forces the mind to turn inward, where things long buried begin to stir. This is why silence disturbs the unconscious. It removes the noise that keeps the inner world asleep. The unconscious does not fear noise. Noise is familiar. Noise is distraction. Endless words, explanations, justifications, jokes, opinions. These are the tools the mind uses to stay safely on the surface. Silence, however, is depth. It is the moment when the mind can no longer hide behind language. When speech stops, meaning does not disappear. It intensifies. What is unsaid becomes louder than anything spoken. Most people feel an instinctive urge to fill silence. A pause in conversation feels like a threat, as if something has gone wrong. This reflex is not social politeness. It is psychological defense. Silence invites projection. When nothing is said, the mind begins to imagine. It searches for intent, judgment, rejection, superiority, danger. The unconscious spills itself into the void. People reveal more in how they react to silence than in anything they say aloud. Silence strips away control. Words allow manipulation of perception. With language, one can soften reality, distort intention, perform a role. Silence offers no such protection. In silence, the mask slips. The nervous system becomes alert. The body senses ambiguity, and ambiguity awakens primal instincts. The unconscious, which thrives on symbols and subtext, suddenly has room to breathe, and it does not always reveal pleasant things. This is why silence feels powerful when held by one who is grounded. A calm silence does not chase approval. It does not rush to explain. It simply exists, and this existence alone destabilizes those who rely on constant feedback to regulate their inner state. When faced with silence, people are forced to confront their own assumptions. They begin asking questions no one has spoken. What is he thinking? Why isn't she responding? Did I do something wrong? The silence becomes a mirror reflecting unresolved insecurities back onto the observer. The unconscious mind is symbolic, not logical. It interprets silence not as absence, but as meaning waiting to be uncovered. This is why silence often feels heavier than speech. Words can be dismissed or argued with. Silence cannot. It lingers. It suggests depth, restraint, inner certainty, or hidden threat. To the unconscious, silence signals that something important is happening beneath the surface. There is also a hierarchy embedded in silence. Those who speak too much reveal their need to be seen, heard, validated. Those who can remain silent signal self-containment. This imbalance is felt instinctively. The unconscious recognizes power not through volume, but through stillness. A person who does not rush to fill space communicates without saying a word that they are not desperate for control. They allow others to expose themselves first. Silence also disrupts expectation. Social interaction runs on scripts, predictable exchanges that keep everyone comfortable. Silence breaks the script. It introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty awakens awareness. When the familiar rhythm of conversation stops, the unconscious wakes up to assess the situation. This is why silence can feel intimidating. It demands presence. It demands interpretation. It forces engagement at a deeper level than casual speech ever could. Internally, silence performs the same function. When external noise fades, the inner dialogue grows louder. Thoughts once drowned out begin to surface. Old memories, suppressed emotions, unexamined desires all rise in the quiet. This is why many people avoid silence when they are alone. They keep music playing, videos running, notifications buzzing. Silence would force them to confront what they have been running from. The unconscious does not whisper, it waits. Silence is its invitation. The power of the unsaid lies in its openness. Words close meaning. They define, limit, categorize. Silence keeps meaning fluid. It allows multiple interpretations to coexist. This ambiguity gives silence its psychological weight. The mind cannot resolve it easily, so it keeps returning to it. A single moment of silence can linger in memory longer than an entire conversation. In social dynamics, silence becomes a form of leverage, not through manipulation, but through non-interference. When you do not immediately respond, you give others space to reveal their motives. They speak more. They explain themselves. They overcorrect. The unconscious pressure of silence pushes hidden intentions to the surface. This is not aggression, it is gravity. Silence pulls truth out of people without force. Yet silence is not passivity. It is active restraint. It requires awareness, emotional regulation, and inner stability. Reactive people cannot hold silence. They need to discharge tension through speech. Those who can remain silent demonstrate mastery over their impulses. The unconscious mind recognizes this mastery instantly. It reads silence as strength, not because it dominates, but because it does not need to. Silence also preserves mystery. In a world where oversharing is encouraged and constant expression is mistaken for authenticity, mystery becomes rare, and rarity creates value. When everything is explained, nothing is felt. Silence allows others to feel, to wonder, to imagine. The unconscious feeds on mystery. It is drawn to what is incomplete. What is unsaid becomes a psychological gravity well. Ultimately, silence disturbs the unconscious because it removes all the usual escapes. There is nowhere to hide, nothing to cling to, no script to follow. It exposes the inner terrain, both in oneself and in others. This exposure can feel threatening, but it is also transformative. Silence is where insight is born, where self-awareness sharpens, where power shifts from performance to presence. The unsaid is not weak. It is concentrated. It holds potential. And when used with intention, not as avoidance, but as awareness, silence becomes more than the absence of words. It becomes a force that rearranges perception, reveals truth, and quietly asserts dominance over the noise of the world. Human beings fear uncertainty more than pain. Pain has shape. It can be named, justified, explained. Uncertainty has none of these comforts. It dissolves boundaries, resists interpretation, and leaves the mind alone with its own unresolved content. This is where shadow projection begins. When people cannot read you, they do not simply feel confused, they feel threatened. And what they fear in you is rarely you at all. It is what your unreadability awakens inside them. The psyche is wired to interpret. From facial expressions to tone of voice, the mind constantly scans for meaning. This process is largely unconscious. It allows people to predict behavior, establish trust, and feel safe within social structures. But when someone cannot be easily read, when their emotions are contained, their intentions unclear, their reactions restrained, the interpretive system breaks down. The unconscious panics. And when it panics, it fills the gap with projection. Projection is not imagination, it is displacement. The unconscious mind takes traits, impulses, fears, and desires it refuses to acknowledge within itself and places them onto someone else. The unreadable person becomes a blank screen. Onto that screen, the observer projects their shadow, the disowned parts of their psyche they do not want to face. This is why calm people are often labeled cold, arrogant, or dangerous. This is why quiet confidence is mistaken for superiority. This is why emotional restraint is read as manipulation. These judgments say nothing about the person being observed and everything about the observer's inner conflict. The shadow cannot tolerate ambiguity. It demands an external enemy to justify its discomfort. When someone cannot read you, they lose control. Predictability equals safety. Readability equals influence. An unreadable person disrupts this balance. They cannot be easily managed, emotionally regulated, or placed into a familiar category. This lack of categorization activates primitive defenses. The unconscious begins asking, what are they hiding? What do they want? Why aren't they reacting like everyone else? The fear does not come from evidence. It comes from absence. People who rely heavily on social cues to define themselves are especially disturbed by unreadability. Their identity is relational. They calibrate their sense of worth through reactions, feedback, and emotional mirroring. When you do not mirror them, when you do not offer emotional confirmation, they experience a subtle identity threat. Your neutrality destabilizes their internal balance. Rather than question themselves, they project intention onto you. Shadow projection intensifies around strength that is quiet. Loud dominance can be challenged. Obvious aggression can be confronted. But silent composure cannot be easily attacked. It offers no handles, no entry point. This forces the observer inward, and inward is where the shadow lives. Instead of facing it, the mind externalizes it. You become intimidating, untrustworthy, fake, or dangerous, labels that soothe the ego by relocating fear outside the self. This mechanism explains why people often react more strongly to those who do less. The one who speaks less reacts slower, reveals little. This person becomes psychologically charged. The unconscious reads restraint as concealment, and concealment is interpreted as threat. Not because it is, but because the mind associates hiddenness with danger. In reality, what is hidden is often simply disciplined. Projection is also fueled by unresolved guilt. When someone carries unexamined impulses, envy, resentment, ambition, hostility, they remain vigilant for those same impulses in others. An unreadable person becomes the perfect target. Since nothing is clearly expressed, the observer can assign whatever motive best aligns with their own suppressed emotions. If they feel envy, they accuse arrogance. If they feel deceit, they accuse manipulation. The shadow seeks recognition without accountability. Fear grows strongest when projection goes unchallenged. Over time, imagined motives harden into assumed truths. The person being projected onto becomes symbolic, a stand-in for everything the observer fears becoming or admitting. This is why rumors form around quiet individuals. This is why myths grow around reserved figures. Silence invites story. Ambiguity breeds narrative. And the unconscious prefers a frightening story over an honest confrontation with itself. Unreadability also disrupts power hierarchies. Many social systems rely on emotional transparency to establish rank. Who reacts first? Who seeks approval? Who explains themselves? When someone refuses to participate in this emotional economy, they operate outside the hierarchy. This independence is threatening. Those invested in the system feel exposed. Their tactics no longer work. So they pathologize the outsider. They project malice where there is simply autonomy. It is important to understand that shadow projection is not deliberate cruelty. It is unconscious self-defense. The ego protects itself from internal collapse by exporting discomfort. The more someone avoids their shadow, the more aggressively they project it. This is why the most judgmental people are often the most internally conflicted. They are fighting battles they refuse to acknowledge. For the one being projected onto, this dynamic can be confusing. You may find yourself accused of intentions you do not have, blamed for emotions you did not create, feared without cause. The instinctive response is to explain, to clarify, to prove innocence, but explanation rarely dissolves projection. It feeds it. The shadow does not seek truth, it seeks relief. And relief comes from maintaining the illusion. The deeper power lies in understanding the mechanism without internalizing it. When you recognize projection, you reclaim psychological sovereignty. You stop reacting to distorted reflections. You remain grounded in your own reality. This stability weakens the projection over time because the unconscious relies on emotional engagement to sustain its narrative. Without reaction, the projected image loses energy. Unreadability, when paired with self-awareness, becomes a form of protection. It filters out those who require control, validation, or emotional access they have not earned. It reveals who is comfortable with ambiguity and who is enslaved by it. Those who can tolerate not knowing will approach with curiosity. Those who cannot will retreat into fear and judgment. Ultimately, people fear what they cannot read because it confronts them with themselves. The unreadable presence removes the usual distractions and exposes the inner world. Shadow projection is the mind's attempt to escape that exposure, but for those willing to observe it calmly, it becomes a powerful diagnostic tool, a way to see not who others are, but what they are running from. To be unreadable is not to be hidden. It is to be whole enough not to perform. And in a world addicted to signals, labels, and constant disclosure, this wholeness will always disturb those who have not yet made peace with their own shadow. Emotional containment is not suppression. It is not denial, avoidance, or emotional numbness. It is discipline, the capacity to feel deeply without leaking inward chaos outward. In a culture that equates expression with authenticity, containment is often misunderstood. Yet to the unconscious mind, emotional containment signals something rare: self-mastery. Mystery emerges not from hiding emotion, but from holding it with precision. Most people externalize their inner state reflexively. They speak when they feel discomfort. They react when they feel threatened. They explain when they feel misunderstood. Emotion becomes discharge. This constant release may feel honest, but it erodes power. When inner states spill outward without control, they become predictable, and predictability invites influence. Contained emotion operates differently. It is not absent. It is integrated. The individual who practices emotional containment experiences emotion fully, anger, desire, fear, joy, but does not allow these states to dictate behavior or identity. This gap between feeling and expression is where mastery lives. It signals that the individual governs their inner world rather than being governed by it. Mystery is a natural consequence of this governance. When emotions are not immediately broadcast, observers cannot easily map reactions or manipulate responses. The contained individual becomes psychologically opaque, not cold, calm, not distant, centered. The unconscious mind reads this opacity as strength because it recognizes regulation where it expects impulsivity. Emotionally uncontained people often misinterpret this as concealment. They assume something is being hidden because they themselves cannot imagine feeling without reacting. This reveals a deeper truth. People judge emotional containment through the lens of their own capacity. Those who lack inner regulation see restraint as threat. Those who possess it see it as maturity. Self-mastery begins with tolerance. The ability to sit with discomfort without immediately acting on it is rare. Most emotional reactions are attempts to escape inner tension. Anger is released to regain control. Oversharing is used to seek reassurance. Humor is deployed to deflect vulnerability. These strategies may bring short-term relief, but they reinforce dependency on external regulation. Contained individuals do the opposite. They allow emotional tension to exist without resolution. This does not weaken them, it strengthens them. The nervous system adapts. The mind learns that emotion does not require action to be survived. Over time, this builds an internal locus of control. Emotional containment becomes embodied, not forced. Mystery arises because emotional containment disrupts expectation. In social dynamics, people anticipate emotional cues to orient themselves. They look for tells, tone shifts, facial expressions, verbal disclosures. When these cues are minimal or delayed, the observer loses their reference. Points. This loss creates psychological space. In that space, projection and curiosity emerge. The contained individual becomes difficult to categorize and therefore difficult to dominate. There is a hierarchy embedded in emotional regulation. Those who react are led. Those who respond are respected. Those who do not need to respond at all are unconsciously deferred to. This is not about dominance, but about stability. The unconscious trusts what is stable. Emotional containment communicates stability without announcement. Mystery also protects inner life. Not every emotion deserves exposure. Not every thought requires articulation. The contained individual chooses when and how to reveal themselves. This selectivity preserves meaning. When everything is shared, nothing is valued. When access is earned, presence deepens. In intimate relationships, emotional containment prevents enmeshment. It allows connection without loss of self. When individuals rely on constant emotional expression to feel close, boundaries dissolve. Containment restores form. It allows two whole individuals to relate without consuming each other. Mystery keeps desire alive by preventing psychological saturation. The same principle applies in conflict. The person who remains emotionally contained during tension controls the tempo. They do not escalate. They do not collapse. They allow the other's emotion to reveal itself fully. This asymmetry often leads the uncontained party to overextend, to say too much, to reveal intent, to lose composure. The contained individual gains information without expenditure. This is why emotional containment is often mistaken for emotional superiority. It is not about feeling less. It is about being less governed by feeling. The unconscious senses this difference immediately. It reads containment as inner order. And where there is order, there is authority. Mystery is not cultivated through performance. It cannot be manufactured through silence alone or strategic withdrawal. Without genuine emotional regulation, mystery becomes affectation, fragile and unsustainable. True mystery is a byproduct of inner coherence. When emotions are integrated rather than expelled, the outer presence naturally quiets. There is also an ethical dimension to emotional containment. Uncontained emotion often spills onto others. It demands reassurance, compliance, or reaction. Containment respects psychological boundaries. It does not burden others with unprocessed inner states. This restraint is felt as maturity, even if it is not consciously articulated. In a society driven by visibility and expression, emotional containment appears countercultural, yet its impact is unmistakable. People lean in. They listen more carefully. They project meaning where none is offered. Mystery fills the gaps. The contained individual does not need to assert significance. It is assigned to them. Ultimately, emotional containment is freedom. Freedom from compulsion. Freedom from reactivity. Freedom from the need to be seen in every moment. Mystery is simply the outer signature of this freedom. It signals that the individual's center of gravity lies within, not in the shifting perceptions of others. Self-mastery is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not seek recognition. It is felt rather than declared. And in a world of emotional noise, this quiet mastery stands out, not by demanding attention, but by refusing to chase it. The sovereign self is not built through isolation, nor through dominance over others. It is built through ownership of one's inner world. Thoughts, emotions, values, intentions, and direction form an internal territory. Like any territory, it requires boundaries. Mystery is not secrecy for its own sake. It is the boundary that preserves psychological sovereignty. Without it, the inner world becomes occupied, influenced, and eventually governed by forces that are not one's own. Modern culture encourages constant exposure. Share your thoughts, display your emotions, explain your motives, make yourself legible. This demand is framed as authenticity, but it often results in self-fragmentation. When the inner world is continually open to external interpretation, it loses coherence. People begin to shape their internal experience around anticipated reactions rather than inner truth. Mystery interrupts this erosion. It creates distance between what is experienced and what is displayed. The sovereign self understands that not all access is earned. Openness without discernment invites intrusion. Every explanation becomes an opening. Every emotional disclosure becomes a point of influence. Those who are unguarded may feel connected, but they are also exposed. Mystery protects against this exposure by limiting access to the inner landscape. It allows the individual to remain whole in environments that would otherwise extract, distort, or dilute their identity. Psychologically, the unconscious recognizes boundaries as safety. A person who maintains mystery signals that their inner world is stable enough not to be outsourced. They do not need constant validation to confirm their reality. This self-reliance is felt immediately. Others sense that emotional manipulation, guilt, or pressure will not easily penetrate. The sovereign self does not resist openly. It simply does not yield. Mystery also neutralizes projection. When inner life is over-disclosed, others feel entitled to interpret, judge, and correct it. Opinions multiply. Advice is imposed. Narratives are rewritten. The inner world becomes a public object. Mystery reclaims authorship. It prevents premature interpretation. What is not exposed cannot be easily distorted. Silence and selectivity act as filters, allowing only those capable of respect to come closer. There is power in being incompletely known, not as a strategy, but as a necessity for psychological survival. The inner world is not static. It evolves. When it is constantly verbalized and categorized, it becomes fixed. People begin to relate to an outdated version of you. Mystery preserves fluidity. It allows growth to happen privately, without being constrained by previous declarations. The sovereign self chooses when to speak and when to withhold. This choice is not driven by fear, but by clarity. Fear hides to avoid harm. Sovereignty withholds to maintain order. The difference is subtle but profound. One shrinks, the other remains intact. Mystery does not withdraw from connection. It defines the terms of connection. In relationships, mystery protects intimacy. Paradoxically, total transparency erodes depth. When everything is revealed immediately, there is no space for discovery. Desire fades when there is nothing left to uncover. Mystery allows intimacy to unfold gradually, aligning emotional depth with trust. It prevents premature enmeshment, where boundaries dissolve before mutual respect is established. The same principle applies in conflict and influence. Those who reveal their inner state too quickly give away leverage. Their fears, hopes, and triggers become visible targets. The sovereign self does not advertise its vulnerabilities. This does not mean denying them. It means choosing where they belong. Some emotions are for reflection, not reaction. Mystery ensures that inner struggles are processed internally before being exposed externally. Mystery also guards against identity invasion. Many people unconsciously attempt to define others to stabilize their own worldview. They label, categorize, and reduce complexity to feel secure. An individual who resists easy definition disrupts this process. They cannot be neatly placed. This resistance protects the inner world from being reshaped to fit external expectations. There is a cost to this sovereignty. Mystery invites misunderstanding. Those accustomed to access may interpret boundaries as rejection. Those who rely on emotional transparency may feel excluded. The sovereign self accepts this cost. It values integrity over approval. It understands that being fully known by everyone is neither possible nor desirable. Internally, mystery creates silence, and in that silence, the self can listen. Without the constant need to explain or perform, attention turns inward, values sharpen, intuition strengthens, direction clarifies. The inner world becomes a place of refuge rather than negotiation. This is the essence of sovereignty, not control over others, but authority over oneself. Mystery is not about superiority. It is about preservation. It ensures that the most vital aspects of the self are not exposed to forces that cannot honor them. Creativity, vision, and meaning require protection. When they are prematurely shared, they are often misunderstood or dismissed. Mystery allows these elements to mature before entering the world. In a society that rewards immediacy and exposure, mystery appears counterintuitive, yet those who maintain it often move with greater freedom. They are less reactive, less entangled, less defined by external noise. Their inner world remains theirs. This ownership is felt. It commands a quiet respect that does not rely on explanation. The sovereign self does not seek to be impenetrable. It seeks to be intact. Mystery is simply the membrane that keeps the inner world alive. It allows connection without surrender, openness without collapse, and presence without dilution. In preserving mystery, one preserves the self. And in preserving the self, one gains the freedom to engage the world on one's own terms.